20 years after Jesus was crucified, the Apostle Paul was traveling through ancient Greece, preaching and teaching the good news of Jesus' resurrection. As he traveled, Paul wrote letters to new believers in Thessalonica. He'd been hearing good things about their faith and wanted to encourage them to keep going. He reassured them in the things they believed, that Jesus died, rose from the dead, and was coming back again, and he wanted to show them how to live in the meantime. So Paul wrote 1st and 2nd Thessalonians to encourage us, to show us what will happen someday, and instruct us how to live now, while we wait.
Hey, good morning. How you guys doing? That was actually pretty good. It has been worse. Good to see you guys. What a beautiful day. Thanks for being here as we are in part 3 of our series, While We Wait, subtitle, a study of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, a look at 2 letters that are part of the documents in what we refer to as the New Testament. Letters that were written by a guy you may have heard of before, pretty famous. His name is Paul, or St. Paul, the Apostle Paul, in collaboration with 2 of his closest friends, Silas and Timothy. And these letters are written to a Christian community. This is like their correspondence with this young startup. Like by the time these letters are written, maybe 5 months ago, this community really started to take off in the Greek city of Thessalonica in the 1st century, which is part of the Roman Empire. And this correspondence with this young just community of Jesus followers who are experiencing, by the way, severe opposition and like hatred and persecution from the community around them, from people in the city of Thessalonica. And it's not really hard to understand why, historically and socially speaking, because they have, in Paul's words, this Jesus-following community has turned away from the idols. They've turned away from the idols and the temples, from the gods that were so prevalent within any Greco-Roman city, and all of those that those gods represented, which really the temples were the center of all life in a city like Thessalonica. They were the center of social life and civic life and financial life, economic life, political life. And having turned away from those temples and those gods, they're being seen not just as kind of anti-social, but actually anti-Roman, anti-Thessalonican, and unpatriotic, that these guys are kind of subversive and actually dangerous. And consequently, many of them in their little community of a few dozen people have lost family and friendship ties. They've lost financial opportunities. They've lost, for those who had it anyway, social standing and honor ranking in the city. And some of them have even lost their lives. Some of them have been killed. And so Paul had taught them that Jesus, who was the true king of all the nations, not Caesar, that Jesus is the true king, that he would return someday and establish his empire, his right side up kingdom in the middle of this upside down world. And he would once again make everything right and everything the way it's supposed to be. But they're wondering, like what you would be wondering, like when? Okay, so when is that going to happen? When is that supposed to happen? And how long must we wait? And how long must we endure this and go through this? And what about those who've died, Paul? What happens to them when this kingdom comes to earth? Which are questions, many of them, those are questions that Christians are still asking today, especially in difficult times, like, Jesus returning? Like, is that a thing? Is Jesus returning? And if so, when? When is that soon? Is he coming soon? Are these the end times? Is this the end? Are these the end time? But for Paul, the real question is not so much when will these things happen. The real question is, how will we live while we wait? That's the question. How will we live while we wait? And so Paul composes these 2 letters in collaboration with Silas and Timothy. A letter that begins, as all Paul's letters will always begin, with this prayer wish: grace and peace to you. Grace and peace to you. And we just pressed pause and camped out there in week 1 of our series, grace and peace to you, grace and peace to you. And we unpacked what those 2 words really mean and what it meant for Paul and for Silas and Timothy to pray those over and wish those over people that they cared about, like grace and peace to you. He begins everything he does, everything he writes, with grace and peace to you. And so we asked the question, well, what would that look like for us? What would it look like if I began everything I said and did? What would it look like for you to begin everything you say and do with Grace and peace to you. If that was the context for everything we said and did, and that's where we stopped in week 1, well, that prayer, grace and peace to you, then launches them into this outpouring of thanksgiving and gratitude and praise to God for this community of people that they love so much and they respect so much. They're so proud of them. And this is where we went last week, that although they have been things are going very badly for them, though they are being persecuted very badly, what they had become widely known for. And so we asked this question, like, what will we be known for? What do you want to be known for? Everybody's known for something. What do you want to be known for? And remarkably, what they had become widely known for was their faith in God, like their allegiance to and their loyalty to God, faith that was authenticated by their actions, the work of their faith, and it was famous for the toil of their love, famous for tough love, and it was faith that was proven through suffering, the endurance of their hope. Well, apparently, as part of the opposition, as part of the struggle, part of the hate that they're experiencing, many of their opponents, maybe even friends and family members, and you can see how this might happen, are casting some disparaging accusations against Paul and Silas and Timothy. And you can almost imagine maybe friends and family members, if you were in their boat, saying, like, who are these guys? I mean, do you even know who these guys are? You have left everything for what they told you, this God that they told you about, and now they have left you. Like, you have been taken, my friend. You are being played for a fool. You don't even know who these people are. They're charlatans. They're just skimming off the top. They're just taking advantage of you. Now, it doesn't appear that the Thessalonians actually believed any of these accusations, but still, I mean, you can imagine how just being peppered with that, like people challenging that and saying that to you with any repetitivity, like that would start to get into you a little bit and start to raise some questions and maybe some doubts. And so the next section of the letter, if you've been following along, maybe reading on your own these letters, and I hope you have. I hope you've taken this series as an excuse to read through these letters yourself and kind of familiarize yourself and go deeper in them. But you'll notice that the entire middle section of the letters, chapters 2 and 3, though keep in mind, when Paul wrote these letters, it was just a letter. There were no chapters, there were no verses. It was just a letter. But that middle section of the letter, in that whole section, he just takes them back to their time together. He just reminds them of what it was like when they were there and how they lived and how they modeled this way of life. And then he walks them through what happened since then, what happened after they got chased out of the city of Thessalonica. And no doubt part of what they're wondering, and part of what we'd be wondering, I'm sure, if we were in their shoes, part of what they're wondering is like, what is happening? What is happening right now? And why is this happening? Why is this happening to us? And what are we supposed to do? What should we do? What should we be doing? How in the world do we move forward, Paul? And so having caught them up, Paul and Silas and Timothy turned their attention to other matters as in the final section of the letter. And you can just see as you read this final section that Paul and Silas and Timothy, they just want to continue to shape and to fan and to fuel this countercultural movement, this alternative society, this community of people, this somewhat revolutionary community of people right in the middle of pagan Thessalonica. Right in the middle of there's this minority group of people who are doing everything the opposite, and it's hard and it's complicated and it's messy to be different, to where everything is the opposite. And so they write to them, as for other matters, brothers and sisters, we ask and we urge you, there's some juice to this, in the Lord Jesus, that just as we instructed you, and he's taking them back to those evenings they spent together in Jason's house in Thessalonica, those long conversations that lasted well into the evening, much of which had to do with a radically different, what would appear from the outside as totally upside down lifestyle, which was shaped by a different worldview, a completely different way of seeing what's happening in this world, what's actually happening right now, and who we are and why we're here and where the whole thing is going. And therefore, how it is necessary to live. Like how, in light of that, how you must live in order to please God. And so we just ask you and urge you, I mean, you're already doing, like you're killing it. And we just say, hey, more and more. Don't let off the gas with all that's facing you. You just blow it up. You just go for it. Now, before we unpack the next thing that they say, I want to set this up. Because what they're about to talk about in this letter sounds to us as old-fashioned. It's like, oh no, here we're talking about this old thing again. But when these ideas were first introduced, they were so new and so strange. I mean, this was a revolutionary new idea. This was newfangled all the way. Because in the first century world, when these ideas were first introduced, women, in fact, all women and girls, the female gender as a whole, were a commodity. They were items, they were objects, they were property. Prostitution was legal and encouraged. In fact, it was actually religious. There were temples that had prostitution as part of their worship, and there was a huge temple in Thessalonica that was devoted to this. Men treated prostitution as birth control. They didn't want to have sex with their wives because sex might lead to children, and children in the ancient world, very unlike how we view childhood. There was no category called childhood in the ancient world. Christians, by the way, invented that. But children before that, they were viewed not as the center of the family and special gifts from God, and the children are our future. Children were viewed as, well, expensive, because they kind of are, as unpredictable, and they kind of are, and they were not the center of anything. And so stopping by a brothel on your way home from work, or after getting a couple of beers with the buddies, in fact, the beers might have been in a brothel, stopping by a brothel on the way home was seen no differently than we would see stopping by Starbucks for a latte on the way home from work, and about the same price point. It was that accessible and that acceptable. Monogamy, the whole idea of a monogamous marriage was actually not a thing. It didn't exist, at least not for men. Now, wives were expected to be chaste because just like to ensure the legitimacy of the male's offspring. And so a wife who was caught sleeping with someone else could be killed. But men, total double standard. They were honestly expected. It would just be assumed that you were having plenty of sex outside of the marriage. In fact, the great famous Greek orator Demosthenes, he says it this way: we keep mistresses for our pleasure, so we got that on the side, concubines who were slaves. We have slaves for our day-to-day bodily needs, but we have wives to produce legitimate children and to serve as trustworthy guardians of our homes. And that's how women were viewed. Boys, little boys, girls, small girls, slaves, including boy and girl slaves, prostitutes, all of them were just open season for the Greco-Roman man. And into this world, Jesus spoke. And his followers like Peter and Paul spoke, and their words grabbed a culture and shook it upside down. It was not old-fashioned. It was not like, we're talking about this again. It was, what in the world are these crazy people talking about? New. And when the Jesus movement came to Thessalonica, it was so revolutionary. It was so unheard of. It was so new. And here's how Paul sets this part of the conversation up. He says, it is God's will, like what he really wants, for you to be. Now, he uses a word next that we don't really use. We don't ever really use it, don't really even know what it means. It's God's will for you to be holy. For you to be holy. Now, you've heard that word before, but mostly used in negative ways, right? So we use maybe the term holier than thou, or, oh, you're so holy. And we don't mean that as a compliment. That's not a positive thing. It refers to somebody, holy refers to somebody who's like really strict about their morality or whatever. And then they kind of hold it over other people and they think they're better than. That is not what this word means. So before we go see where it goes, let's get a sense of what this word means. The basic sense of the word holy is unique. It's unique, it's totally different, and therefore it's like set apart, or we might use words like consecrated or sacred, especially as to how it relates to the divine or divinity, the gods in their world, or God himself. And because of that, it is something that's holy, is deserving of very special honor. It is treated a completely different way. So for example, the first thing to be called holy in the story is the seventh day, or the Sabbath, or Shabbat. In fact, in an ancient document that we refer to as Genesis. It's part of the Hebrew Scriptures. On page 2 of the story, God sanctifies or holifies the seventh day. Now, we don't have a verb for the word holy. We don't holy things. But if we did, that would be this word. He holifies it or he makes it holy, which means the seventh day, it's not common. It is not common. It's not a normal day. We got 6 everyday days. You do whatever you want. You got 6 days to do anything you want to do. That's every day. That's common. You treat those as common. But the seventh day, no. It's different. It's different. It's unique. It's special. It's set apart. It's connected with God himself uniquely. It is levels above ordinary, and therefore it is honored. It's honor. We treat that day with this special honor. It's not a normal day. And so holiness and honor actually are tied together. Now, the quintessential expression or example of holiness in the story itself is actually God. That God is a being that is unlike, unique, unlike anything else we know or could know, a being who is completely other than and beyond and non-contingent. This is the only thing that exists that is not dependent on anything else to exist, anything within creation, because this being is the only thing that exists outside of creation. It is a non-contingent, beyond anything we could possibly ever know or imagine being, God. Now, I don't know what you believe about God or where you're at on the processing that or what you used to believe and what you're wondering about, but let's just say hypothetically, okay? I want to give you a thought experiment. Just imagine this with me. Imagine as a thought experiment a being who is capable of thinking up and imagining everything that exists before anything had ever existed, like blank screen, blank stage or blank canvas, imagining everything that exists and everything that's necessary for everything that exists, including the laws of physics themselves, and not only imagining it, but generating it, causing it all to be, initiating all of that into existence. We would say, again, like if we're just speaking hypothetically, that being, a being like that, is very, very, very different than any of us or anything else that we could even imagine. There is an absolute goodness, an absolute purity of thought, purity of motive and intent, purity of action. So there's an integrity, a oneness to this being. There is no duplicity. There is no shade of one thing that I show you, but there's something else going on. There are no coping mechanisms that plague us as human beings because we're just so fractured and trying to figure things out and kind of dancing through stuff. This is a being who is utterly pure and integrous to the core, full of wisdom, including the relational, emotional health and wholeness that wisdom implies, and truth and love. And this being of absolute goodness and love and glory and efficacy and health and wholeness makes creatures in his image. And I put air quotes around his because the creatures he makes are actually male and female in his image to reflect that same goodness and nobility and glory and dignity and health and wholeness into his creation, to be his image in creation, to represent him, to rule in his stead, and to do it together in perfect oneness with each other and with him. And he calls these beings that he makes, he calls them Adam, which is the Hebrew word for human. They're human beings. And of course, the human beings in the story, they blow it big time and all the time. I mean, they end up very unglorious and very undignified, ashamed, and less than who they truly are. And the rest of the story is all about really regaining that in humanity, that God's seeking to restore people to that unique representative relationship and identity, to holify them, to make them holy. And the human beings, of course, is constantly blowing it, failing epically to recognize the glory and the goodness, the nobility, the dignity of what it means to be human, that we are and were created to be and reflect, and totally failing to see it in the other. Failing again and again and again to see it in the other person and to treat that other person worthily of that. Human beings are created to be holy. Human beings are created to be, that is core. That is core part of our original identity. That is part of what is truest about you, created in the image of God, holy and worthy of incredible honor. So Paul says to the Thessalonians, this is God's will. It's God's will for you to be holy, that you are to be who you truly are, worthy of being the image of God, living a life that is worthy of the calling that you have received. And part of that, to truly see yourself and all human beings that way, is that you would avoid, we've translated this, sexual sin, everything that's messed up in the world regarding or dysfunctional about human sexuality. Now, the word he actually uses, he's writing in Greek, we translate it into English. The word he uses is porneia, and you can imagine a handful of words that come into our language from that word. But porneia originally referred to prostitution and anything related to prostitution, but by this time in history, it had come to mean that entire category of sex as appetite gratification, sexual activity outside of the lifelong committed union, the becoming oneness of marriage. And in an over-sexualized world, and Thessalonica was, we kind of are too, where images of God are regularly seen as and treated as nothing more than animals. We're just animals doing what animals do, or worse, just things, just objects, means of satisfying an appetite. This means that you see yourself and all other human beings differently. You see everything differently. You're like, you're holy. You're this. I thought you were that. Oh, you're up here. I thought you were down there. I have made a massive category mistake. I thought you were a bazooka bubblegum wrapper. I could take the gum, look at the wrapper, toss it away because I don't need it anymore. You're a Rembrandt. Oh my gosh, you're a Stradivarius. What did I just throw away? What did I just treat as trash? What did I just use and discard? What have I done? You're holy. That we would begin to see ourselves and every other human being in the image of God in that same way, which includes, of course, seeing yourself that way and treating yourself that way. So that's what he says next. And that each of you would know how to control your own vessel. And here perhaps Paul may be using a word that they use to refer to this. Like, hey, Paul, it's just a vessel, man. It's just a vessel. It's just my body. Very typical Greek Platonic thinking. Like the body's the body. It doesn't, like physical is physical. It's not spirit. Like I can do stuff with my body. It doesn't really reflect who I am. It doesn't actually affect who I am deep down inside. It's just a vessel. He's saying, oh, no. You have missed something deeply, my friends. You treat your body as it really is, holy and worthy of honor. He goes on to say, not in the passions of desires, that is, the urges of just your appetites, the things you want, the driven by your cravings in a given moment. Don't be driven by that like everybody else that lives in Thessalonica. Like everybody, like who you used to be. Like the world around you who do not know God, who do not know who God truly is. And you didn't used to, but now you do. Who do not know God and therefore don't know who they're created to be and what it means to be human. They don't know the story and they don't know their place in it, but you do. And one of the great fallacies, by the way, of their culture, absolutely, and our culture as well, is that sex is just an appetite. It's just like anything else. It's just physical. It's just an appetite. I mean, you get urges, like you're hungry, you get something to eat, you're thirsty. You get something to drink, you have sexual urges, you just satisfy that. I'm just satisfying an appetite, satisfying an urge. It's just physical. It's just my body. It's just a vessel. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not spiritual. But the truth is, sex is not just physical. And we already know this. We know this so well. That is why sexual assaults and sexual trauma affect us so much more deeply than physical injuries or physical assaults. It's at a whole deeper, different level. It's why for many, many people, including maybe some of us in here, why some of our deepest regrets, our darkest secrets that maybe no one else in the world even knows, and often our deepest pain, our greatest hurts in this world are so often related to something that's sexual. And that's because sexuality is tied to your personhood. It's tied to your humanity, and it is tied to your soul in the most integral way. And when you treat or we treat that as just a physical thing, we hurt ourselves and we hurt other people too, which is where he goes next. He says, and in this matter, that no one would transgress. That is, like, to transgress is to cross over a boundary that you don't belong in. To cross over a boundary that belongs to another person, that no one would trespass or transgress or take advantage of or like cheat or defraud a brother or sister, even if it is consensual. And here's the big idea. Treating a human being, think about this, as who is created in the image of God, like that's the core identity, as an animal, because we're just animals, or worse, a thing, an object, even if they consent to it. Even if they say, that's how you treat me and that's what I will be, even if they see themselves that way, to treat a human being created in the image of God in that way is a direct affront to the one whose that image actually is. Now, the Thessalonians would have picked this up. This would have been the most obvious thing in the world to them, because in Greco-Roman culture, the image represented the God, but in a very direct way. The idol or the image was directly connected to the God and how you saw that God and what that God's honor or reputation was. And so to treat an image, which no one would ever do. I mean, no one would ever do. Even in war, when armies are conquering other gods and other kingdoms, they still treat the God with like the idol. It's like no. To treat an image with disrespect, you are just inviting, like whatever that God might do to you. And so they would have picked up on this so quickly, which is where they go next. If you treat God's image, even if they consent to it, in that dishonorable way, God will take how we treat them sobering, personally, and the Lord himself will repay justice. And maybe there are some things that have happened to you in your life, or happen to people that you love and you care for. And maybe it feels like there was no justice. Like justice never happened, but there will be. Because you are the image of God. And if people have treated you less than the honorable way that the image of God deserves, the Lord repays justice. He will repay justice, as we told you and warned you before, for God did not call us. And like he connects this, they connect this with what holiness is always connected to. It's vocation, it's identity, it's purpose, it's who we are, it's why we're here, it's what we're doing in the world. It's part of our calling. God did not call us to be common, to be stepped on or used, or to be impure. He's called us to be holy, like God, fulfilling that representative role in the world. And here's how he wraps up. Therefore, anybody who rejects this instruction, because that's possible, probable, really, that there are going to be plenty of people that go, I don't think so. That's not for me. I appreciate that you feel that way. That's not where I'm going with this. Sounds a little cray-cray. Anyone who rejects this, he's like, that's okay. You're not rejecting me. You're not rejecting Silas. You're not rejecting Timothy. You're not rejecting human beings. You are rejecting God. You're rejecting God, the very God who gives you, I love this, who gives you his Spirit to live in us. That vessel that you refer to actually is a container for the divine. The divine presence lives in you. His Spirit lives in you. And then they just put a little exclamation point on the whole thing. His Spirit, oh yeah, BT dubs, the Holy Spirit. His Spirit, who is holy, is in you. So be holy. So how do we live while we wait, Paul? How do we live while we wait? What do we do? What do we do? How do we move forward? And the first thing he says is kind of maybe a little surprising, even shocking, but so powerful. While we wait, we treat ourselves, we treat our bodies and everyone else's as holy, holy expressions or images of our collective Creator God, as the unique, special, uncommon, holy image of God created to reflect God in our world. Now, just imagine for a moment a group of people taking that seriously. Imagine a group of men in the Greco-Roman world. Imagine people who have been so enculturated in a hyper-sexed, sex as appetite, women and children as commodities world, actually buying into this old-fashioned, which was totally newfangled worldview and buying in 100%, like just going all in. a group of a community, but especially the men, just like, we're all in. We're going to treat ourselves and we're going to treat others, especially women and children who are the most likely to be treated as usable and discarded. We are going to treat them this way. Imagine people who actually did that. And you go, well, that would probably change the world. And it did. There was a time, long, long ago, when a group of men got this. I mean, they really got this. They so elevated the status of women. They so elevated the status of women from where it was in the Greco-Roman world, their daughters, their sisters, their wives, strangers on the street, that women flocked to the Jesus movement in the first 3 centuries. They flocked to it because the Jesus movement really was the world's first women's liberation movement. It was the first movement to truly elevate women. In fact, one historian puts it this way: the safest place in the ancient world, in all the ancient world, hands down, the safest place for a woman, a female of any age to be, was a Christian home. To be in the home of a Jesus-following dad, or Jesus-following husband, or Jesus-following brother or son, that was the one place in all the world where women knew they would be treated as human beings worthy of the dignity of the image of God. It was 100% new, and it changed the world. Now, part of this all-new worldview bleeds into the next thing he says. He says, and the word he's about to say is actually a very famous word. Of course, he's writing in Greek, we translate it into English. And the next word he says is now about, what is that word? Say it out loud. Philadelphia, which means brotherly love, right? The city of brotherly love, except the Greeks actually used that term for the sisters too. So it is better translated actually sibling love. It's the love that brothers and sisters, that siblings have for each other, the family type of common bonds that might be treated, and remarkably and shockingly, and it really is shockingly, taking a cue from Jesus himself, the early Christians who always represented a completely, just never really seen before, unusual, socially disparate group. There were no places in the ancient world, in any society, where people like this sat together in the same room and treated themselves as equals, like kosher, Torah-observant Jewish people, non-kosher, bacon-eating, non-Jewish people, former pagan idol worshipers, social elites, ruling class people, and slaves, and working people, and men and women would never associate with themselves in the ancient world. And here they were coming together, and they would create communities, like genuine communities, and immediately become family, which really bugged some observers in the ancient world. Like, that really blew people's minds and made them mad. For example, 2nd century writer Marcus Cornelius Fronto, he criticized Christians for this. He said, they recognize each other by secret marks and signs, which means they had ways of finding where their community was when they were in a city that they didn't know. Like, you just moved here, where would my people be? Where would the Jesus followers be? And then they show, like, hardly have they even met when they love each other. He can't stand this. He thinks this is like, there's something wrong with this. Indiscriminately, they just start throwing around the word Philadelphia, and they're watering it down, and they're calling each other brother and sister, and that means something to us. So one Christian, what's his name? Minucius Felix, that's it. He just goes, yep, you got us. True as accused, Your Honor. Like, yep, that's who we are. It's true. We really do love one another, and that seems to really bug you. Like a fact that you deplore, since, I love this line, we don't even know how to hate. What if that could be said of all Christians? We don't even know how to hate. Hence, it is true. We do call each other brother because we are men of the one and same God and Father, co-partners in faith, co-heirs in hope, brothers and sisters, family of God who is our Father, completely mixed, like socially all over the board, never have had a true conversation with each other till a few months ago. The Thessalonians, people this diverse would not talk to each other if they passed on the streets. And now, like, immediately treating each other with care and attentiveness and love and openness to one another and interest, taking care of each other, got each other's backs. In this community, hey, no one is going to have to face what we face out there alone. We have each other. Now about sibling love, he says, we don't even need to tell you. There's nothing we can add to it because you yourselves, it's like you've been taught by God to love one another. Like we set the table for you, we gave you some of this stuff, but where you guys have taken it, only God could be shaping this in your community. You have become famous for the toil of your love. And in fact, you not only love one another, you love God's whole family, not just here in the next line there, not just here, but throughout the whole state. Like you don't just love the followers of Jesus in Thessalonica. You got Philippi covered, you got Berea covered, you got all the other cities covered too. It's amazing. And we just urge you, brothers and sisters, you just do that more and more. You just turn that up to 11. You just take that all the way. So how do we live, Paul? How do we live? What do we do while we wait? While we're suffering and struggling, how do we move forward? He goes, well, number 2, you love and care for one another as members of God's family. We just want to fan that into flame. We just want to blow some O2 on that fire and let it go. Do not let your confusion that you feel, the heartache that you experience, the exhaustion you may have, for all of that opposition and what feels just like the day-to-day fight of it all, do not let it cause you to lose the distinctiveness of the Jesus movement, to lose the brand, which is, it's love. It's how you love one another. You just be famous for that. And that's what you do while you wait. That's in the uncertainty, not knowing when what will happen next will happen. Here's what you do. You just love really well. You love really well. And I think there are few things, if anything, that's more countercultural in our totally individualistic, highly mobile, just passing through, not setting down roots, not going to know and be known, love and be, not doing any of that, isolated culture than this vision right here, the vision of genuine community and family. Can you imagine? Then he adds one more big idea to the mix. We urge you, brothers and sisters, to do that. You just do that more and more, and to make it your ambition to live quietly. Here's this, yet another totally counterintuitive, kind of backwards, flip everything on its ear, countercultural idea. In fact, everything in this letter is about creating this alternative society, this minority movement where everything is inverted and nothing is like what it is outside. Ambition was actually very highly valued in the Greco-Roman world. It was one of the highest values. And in their world, kind of in ours too, maybe, in their world and kind of in ours, it referred to like the active machinations and scheming that you would do kind of behind the scenes or in front of the scenes to elevate your own honor and your own status and your own position, to move up the ladder a little bit and climb over other people and maybe stab them in the back if you need to in order to move yourself up, and you just make a little noise for yourself, but like in a clever way. Like you got to make noise for yourself in like a subtle, appropriate way at times, but you just do what you need to do. And Paul says, yeah, like go for it. Be ambitious. But then he flips it. Like he flips everything. As a follower of Jesus, we live in a right side up kingdom, but in this upside down world where in our kingdom, all of the status and all of the ladders and all of the anybody up and down of anything and all of the machinations and schemings, we see that for what it really is. Not just a fool's game, which it is. Not just a rat race where only rats win, which it is. But as deeply, deeply messed up. Like it is really, really, really messed up. It is core to what is upside down and broken in this upside down world. And so we never play that. We live the opposite. Oh, we're ambitious. He says, be ambitious, but in a whole different direction. So he says 3 things next that actually go together. They're 3 parallel statements. And they're said to, I think in some ways, to counterbalance this community ethic of selfless love and support of one another, because in a community where radical generosity and having each other's backs always, and in a community of givers, it is inevitable that some might become takers. Like if you will always have my back and you will always give to me, well, I need. And rather than the healthy reciprocity of knowing and being known, and loving and being loved, and serving and being served, needing and being needed, the mutuality, the healthy reciprocity of good relationships and good community. When somebody begins to just take and only consume, it becomes unhealthy. It becomes unhealthy for everyone. But, and here's what we might easily miss, especially for the taker. It's especially unhealthy for the one who is only taking or consuming because they are becoming less than who they really are. They are actually becoming less than human. And so here's where he takes it. He says, so be ambitious, absolutely. But be ambitious, first of all, to live quietly, not to add more noise to a noisy world. You don't need to do that. On the DL, like, no muss, no fuss, to take responsibility for your own life, to take care of your own responsibilities, or as we say in recovery circles, to clean up your own side of the street. I'm mad and I'm upset, but wait a minute. I need to look at my own side of the street here. I need to make sure I'm taking care of my side of the street. What am I responsible for? What do I need to do? What do I need to learn? That I'm always, always, always taking responsibility, because responsibility is part of human dignity. God creates us for it, and when we try to shuffle it away, we're shuffling away part of who we really are. Like, no, we take our own responsibility, even as others help us, and to work with your own hands. Now, Paul is a Jewish background guy, trained as a rabbi, and to Paul and to Silas and Timothy, they saw work, including manual or working with your hands, as dignity. Work was dignity, and it's important to know the Greco-Roman world did not share that sentiment. Now, they were not like America. Americans still have a bit of a work ethic. We got our work ethic from Christianity, but before that, in the Greco-Roman world, work was indignity, especially to work with your hands, to do the work yourself. And the ambition of anyone who was upwardly mobile was to have enough money that you could buy slaves to do all of that for you, so your hands would never have to touch work. And Paul is seeking to ground this community in yet another countercultural value, the dignity of work. By the way, this is one of many ways that Christians ended slavery in the first few centuries, and then ended it later. But the dignity of work, it's a whole part of this letter. As you read the letter, he's building this all the time, and he especially emphasizes it in the second letter, that part of what it means to be the image of God, that God is a creator. He created us, and in his image we are created to create, to contribute, to bring something good, to take things further, to add value. In fact, the very first thing that God gives the Adam, the human, after he creates him is a J-O-B. That's what he gives him. He puts him in the garden. He says, I didn't finish it. I didn't finish it on purpose. I started it. Now you take it further. You take the land, the stuff is there, and you create, and you add value, and you imagine things, and you do it the way you want to do it. I'm giving you the responsibility and the freedom, but you are here to be like me, to rule in my creation. And for Paul and Silas and Timothy, working and adding value and creating something and contributing, bringing something good to the world and to other people, not just providing for your own needs, which is huge, but even more, having something to provide for the other, having something to bring to others, being a net giver in life and not a net taker. It's part of what it means to be holy. It's part of what it means to be human. It's part of what it means to be like God. So here's how he ends the whole section. So here's the why. He says, so that your daily life may win the respect. Your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anyone. What do we do while we wait, Paul? What do we do? How do we move forward? Here's what he says next. He says, be ambitious. Absolutely. Be ambitious for a quietly responsible life. No muss, no fuss. You're just taking care of business for a quietly responsible life that attracts the respect of onlookers. And this is so huge for Paul. He emphasizes this in letter after letter after letter, that Jesus' followers' behaviors and actions should always make the message and movement of Jesus more attractive and more respectable, so that people in their community and our community would look at us, even if they don't believe what we believe and not at our beliefs, but they would look at what we do and they would look how we live, and they would say, well, I don't know if I want to become one of them, but man, those guys are you got to respect them. I don't know if I believe what they believe, but you got to respect them. because look at how they live. Now, real quick, next week is part 4 of the series, and you are not going to want to miss next week. If you've ever heard of the rapture, that word rapture, you've ever heard that used, and you're wondering, what's that all about? If you've ever seen a bumper sticker that says, in case of rapture, this car will be unmanned, or if you've never heard of the rapture, and now you're going, what is that all about? What Paul says next in this letter is so powerful and so misunderstood. You are not going to want to miss next week. But I want to wrap it up today with this phrase that I keep using over and over again, the image of God. The image of God. That every single human being you will ever lay eyes on, including the human beings you lay eyes on a screen or on a magazine, that every human being you lay eyes on is created in the image of God, to reflect his glory and nobility and dignity, to be holy, worthy of honor. And what if this week, just maybe for 7 days, and then you can go back to whatever you've been doing perhaps, but what if just this week we were to begin seeing every human being, and I mean every human being, every man, every woman, every teenager, every child, every friend, every family member, every opponent, every ex, every person who's serving you, every person that you're serving, what if we were to see every human being as the image of God? The image of God. Now, 2 weeks ago, as the series began, I left us with a challenge to just be whispering under our breath. And many of you said, man, I've been doing like a mantra, just like grace and peace to you, grace and peace to you. Everything that happens, like, let me start here, grace and peace to you. This week, I want to give you a similar challenge. That maybe as you go through this week, you would just whisper under your breath, maybe again, like over and over again, the image of God. Hey, there goes the image of God, the image of God. In fact, I want us to say this out loud together. Will you say it with me? 1, 2, 3. The of, again, this is the image of God. That maybe you just start to whisper under your breath. In fact, turn to the person next to you and go, hey, you're the image of God. There you go. Hey, look at that. Hey, you're the image of God. I didn't know. Look at you, image of God. What if this week, just every interaction you just said, hey, there's the image of God. Hey, every person you see, every image, every picture you see, you say, maybe just under your breath, maybe out loud, let's say it together, the image of God. Oh, wow, there's the image of God. Acting like it, totally not acting like it. What are they? The image of God. Source of joy to you, source of endless frustration, agony, and anger. What are they? The image of God. Everyone I'm tempted to treat as an object or a thing, maybe an object who would just satisfy a desire or an urge I have, or maybe an object that's in my way that I just need to get out of my way and step over. What are they? They're not an object. That's not a thing. That's the image of God. That's the image of God right there, and I will treat them befittingly as I would treat God himself, because that's his image. Let me close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for bestowing on us an honor, a dignity, frankly, a calling that is so far beyond the dignity and the honor that we often give ourselves. So far beyond the honor and dignity that often many of the people we bump into the world are ascribing to us. And you keep saying that's who you are, so be who you are. Be holy. Be worthy, live worthily of being my image. And so I just want to thank you. That's just unbelievable that you would see us that way. And then I want to pray for myself and for anyone else who just wants to throw their name into this prayer. Help us this week to see every single person you've created in your image, whether they're seeing themselves like that or not, to see every single person who you've created in your image as the image of God, holy and worthy of honor. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.